Do we have right now, do you believe, the wherewithal to carry out something as daring as that? Do we have the spirit? Do we have the know-how? Do we have the weaponry? Do we have the equipment?
Do we have the wherewithal to plan it? Just. Do we have the wherewithal to do it? No, we're nowhere near it. The military have been hollowed out in numbers of equipment, but it's not just the military, it's the supporting elements that are in there, the defence industrial base. There's so many elements of D-Day that are not really in the public domain and talked about a lot, like the pipeline under the sea, which was a huge pipeline that took fuel from the UK into the Normandy beaches. Like the Mulberry harbours that were floated across and built harbours.
These were created.
These were created
just for this
just for this mission, to bring in the logistics that were needed, so the ammunition, the fuel, the water, and to bring the medical supplies in and the casualties back out again. So you mentioned the deception operations. The Dambusters 617 Squadron were involved in a top secret mission to reinforce that deception operation that was going on in the Pas de Calais by dropping strips of aluminium at set intervals through the day out over the channel, confusing the German radar because there were transmissions going on to suggest that ships were coming across there and all that, and it was all part of the deception. The complexity of what happened on D-Day, and D-Day is the beginning of Operation Overlord. There are lots of D-Days.
Yeah.
The beginning of every operation
and it wasn't
D-Day.
just one day. The landings took days.
Exactly. So the beginning of Operation Overlord, and the operation itself was significant. And they'd only been planning it since sort of summer 1943, and that planning time to get to that and get everything manufactured was amazing.
Would war now, would that move more quickly? Because what we've actually seen, say, with recent wars, we're talking about Afghanistan and Iraq, I think, lots of surprise that, Saddam Hussein's forces, basically collapsed, started just, driving away. We took, 6 weeks to take Baghdad. Of course, then the disaster that's unfolded since then. Afghanistan, again, we thought we'd taken Kabul. Turns out, as we saw a couple of years ago, the Kabul airlift, we hadn't got that convincingly done. But, with Ukraine, Vladimir Putin expecting it would be a matter of a couple of weeks before he would just take Kyiv and move on. 2.5 years on, things are very different. But now we've got the upgrading there, haven't we? We've got the US saying to Zelensky, you can use US-made and supplied weapons on Russian soil, and therefore that that upgrades things. Vladimir Putin yesterday at various meetings with world media saying, well, we're going to supply long-range ballistic missiles to our allies, who could then hit the territory of those, the US, the Europeans who are supplying those weapons. We often think of like an invasion or World War would start with a big bomb, a nuclear bomb or a big. We go from nothing to war. That's not how it happens, is it? Well, it's a slow process.
Yeah, the Second World War, we had Chamberlain coming down the steps into the airport, waving his paper saying peace in our time. Well, we were at World War not long after that. At the moment, the indicators and warnings are stronger than they were before the Second World War for what's going on around the world for us, and we're just not prepared. And a lot of that lack of preparation is down to the political pressure to spend money not on defence but on issues that capture votes. Because in reality, if you spend money on defence, all that's spent in your own economy, so it creates more jobs, it creates more training, it creates a greater spirit, and it builds up your robustness.
But you don't really see the benefit of the army, unless during COVID, when we had to bring the army in to do everything, because they're only people who are competent enough in the public sector to do anything. But you put a nurse or a teacher on the front line in their sector, that has an immediate impact on a patient getting seen, on a child getting taught. But the immediate impact of a soldier being put on the front line in training, well, we hopefully we never see that. That's kind of the weird thing, isn't it?
But again, if you look at the majority of the 140,000 plus troops that went across the beaches, another 13,000 plus were dropped in by air or glider. A large proportion of those were teachers, solicitors,
They were conscripts. It's fascinating because people talk about the bravery, and it's incredible when you hear the testimonies of the few surviving veterans from that day. And again, these big anniversaries, they're every 5 years. realistically, even in the next 5 years, we are going to see, given the longevity of people, far fewer brave men from that day are still alive and with us. But when you hear their testimonies, some of them say, "No, I don't even know how I survived. My mates didn't," and they always want to talk about their comrades who died and not about themselves. That is not a generation that bigged themselves up. That is a generation that knew about the incredible sacrifice of those who died. And we talk about their bravery, and my God, these people are beyond brave. But actually, for a lot of them, they weren't given a choice. Yes. They were conscripts. They were just, there you go on a boat. One man I remember hearing about in the last couple of days, talking about how he'd been in training sort of 3 years, had finally got posted. This was his first posting. He got shot within the first 3 minutes. He said, "My entire war was 3 minutes."
Yes.
Very brave. Now, it is interesting. We've had numerous ceremonies. We've got ceremonies this morning. We've had ceremonies in Portsmouth yesterday. Ceremonies today in Normandy. Numerous events taking place because of many different beaches where the Allied forces landed, and veterans are going to obviously those specific to them. We've also got world leaders. We've got Prime Minister, we've got the King, we have the Leader of the Opposition, Keir Starmer, we've also got obviously the French President, the German Chancellor, the Belgian Prime Minister, the Dutch, and of course the American President, Joe Biden, on an official visit to France as well, all going to be at these events throughout the day, marking this. But I did find it interesting, we've got lots of sort of almost reenactments of what happened. British military parachuting in this morning, as they did back 80 years ago, and a point has been made that they then had to, with their passports, go through French passport control, having parachuted in. And Lord Ashcroft, who's written much about this, the military issue, and his father served in the military in the war, and he's pointed out it's a good thing they didn't have to do that back in 1944.
Well, yes, I think I tweeted something similar out this morning when I saw the story, and it quite amusing. And going through passport control, that's just a reflection of modern society and the fact that it wasn't just British military personnel, there were civilians and other nations in there as well. And probably the least complex thing to do was a quick passport check as they're coming in.
Can I just ask, I'm sure people who are watching will want to know your medals. That's a broad collection. I know in a military dress suit it wouldn't go over the side of the jacket, but tell us from one side to the other what those medals are.
Oh, crikey!
I'm making him do this. He's not a showy offy man, but I'm going to make him do it anyway because I'm in awe. I'm in awe of people who do this.
Now you're putting me on the spot. This one, the cross, is the member of the Order of the British Empire. So it's not member of the British Empire; it's member of the Order of the British Empire, or my beep efforts. When it comes to things. The next one is the General Service Medal with clasp Northern Ireland. The next one is the United Nations Medal for Croatia and Bosnia, UNPROFOR. I got that for Croatia. The next one is NATO Medal for Bosnia. Then we've got the NATO Medal for Kosovo, and the NATO Medal for the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia, when it was called that, now North Macedonia. Then we have the Iraq Medal, and then we have the Queen's Golden Jubilee Medal. So all of those are operational, and that's the only one for... you're celebrating one of Her Majesty's.
I think on behalf of everyone here, thank you for for this is it. This is it. Let's face it, most of us. I'm a very brave armchair general. You're
a very good armchair general.
People like you are the people who actually do the real business, and we salute you. Thank you very much indeed. I'm sure everyone listening and watching agrees with me. Let's talk about what else is happening, because of course real politics, not mean and nasty election politics, kind of on the back burner today. Everyone's focusing. Apparently there's who knew there's an election going on. Fascinating new polls showing Reform UK have moved to just 2 points behind the Conservatives in this latest poll. This, of course, after Nigel Farage announced that he stands an MP and come back as the party leader. It's a YouGov poll putting Reform at 17%, the Tories at 19%. That is going to put the cat among the pigeons in number 10, isn't it?
Well, very much so. It's interesting. The last general election, we had the Boris factor, and now we've got the Nigel factor coming in. And when you look at the I will say bluff and bluster, because it's the bluff and bluster from both of them in the way that they put their statements out and campaign. They've got very similar traits. They're different personalities, but they've got similar traits in the way they do things, and that seems to appeal to people. And that, I think, will be scaring number 10. But I think if the Reform Party focused on the elements that followed Boris beforehand, which is the red wall seats.
Yeah.
I think Keir Starmer's probably sitting there quietly getting worried, and he's just dropped 6 points.
Well,
in
that's
the poll.
interesting. The Reform take more votes from the Tories, but what is interesting, actually, looking at the seats where they are set in second place currently on the polling, they are so far behind Labour in all of those seats. They could still be, they could overtake. I mean, there's a prediction. Nadine Dorries reckons the Reform UK are going to overtake the Tories by the weekend. If they did, even if they did, they could still end up with no seats.
Yeah.
It is perfectly possible under the first past the post system. It depends how your seats are, how your votes are racked up. Again, the Lib Dems do pretty well on the system because they have their seats. They've got lots of votes in in the southwest and in Oxford and Cambridge and places like that. It's going to be interesting to watch, isn't it? We've had this big row over tax that's gone on since the ITV leaders debate on Tuesday night. Basically, Sunak said, if you vote Labour, you're going to get £2,000 on average per house. Or it didn't even say on average. It said every household's going to face £2,000 tax hike. Now, of course, averaging out, from working households, from the extra pledges that Labour have made, they also claimed that this was civil service, Treasury officials. Treasury's got, wasn't us, Gov. No, thank you. There'll have been some work, some paperwork that they've been involved. But civil service said, we haven't written this document, nothing to do with us. They're quite unhappy about it. There may be a breach of the ministerial code, as Labour is saying, by claiming such a thing. But the claims have come back that actually have used the same workings out over what the Tories have seen given people in terms of tax rises, that it's actually something like £13,000 extra that we're paying as a result of Tory tax rises. But does anyone, do you think, pay attention to this? Is having the row still worth it because you're still talking about it, you're associating the phrase tax rises with Labour? Or is this the sort of game plan you think most voters will say, look, you're all going to put my taxes up. I know you're all lying sods anyway, and I don't trust any of you.
Well, I think that's part of it. But I think whenever you wrestle a headline and get it in first and it sticks in people's minds, then no matter what the arguments are afterwards, it doesn't matter. So the £2,000 tax
it's like
rise
what you write on the side of a bus.
Yeah, exactly. Well, 100%. And Rishi Sunak has won that argument. Labour coming in afterwards and saying he's a liar and all the rest of it. Actually, when I've read the letter from the civil service head to
the permanent
Labour,
secretary of the Treasury,
exactly, who didn't turn around and dispute the figures. He turned around and said, we didn't make these up. And Labour haven't disputed the figures. They're just disputing the fact that the Tories had said that it was the Treasury that had said this. So the figures are there. I went through, just before we came on air, Labour's current tax policy on their website. They haven't published
no manifestos from anyone.
There's no manifestos out at the moment and all the rest of it. But your Labour saying they're not going to put tax up. There's no commitment in their current tax pledges to increase the basic allowance that's there.
Yeah.
They've been criticising the Tories for not doing that. So if Labour don't put that up, at least in line with inflation, then there's de facto a tax
whoever's going to
increase.
be in government, and there's only two parties realistically going to do that on the current polls, everyone's going to have their taxes rise.
Correct.
And that's also whenever they say we're not going to put up the rates of income tax, but you'll still be paying more income tax.
Correct.
Because of those thresholds pushing people who are on very average incomes a few years ago, and now because of inflation, so they can't buy any more. They're not any richer. They're still worse off. But they're going to be some of them paying the higher rate of tax, even though they're on average incomes. But this is it. We've got all these other pledges about Labour being challenged by the Tories now to commit to not raising property taxes, like capital gains tax, redoing council tax as they've done in Wales, where Labour are in charge. We'll come to Wales in a few moments. But I mean, it's all very well, isn't it? But the answer you always get from every party is we have no plans. But any party can get in and go, so it turns out the books aren't quite what we thought they were.
Yeah.
And now we're going to... But isn't it better that everyone's honest about what the state of the economy is and having to go... Not that you can predict very much, we know that. But also, isn't it better that voters... I was talking about this with Mike before 10, that voters start being a little bit more grown up and don't say, well, we don't want our taxes to go up, but I don't want any waiting lists in the health service.
Yeah.
I want extra teachers in schools. I want all the potholes fixed. I want spending on defence. I want benefits for this, pensions to go up. Sorry, you're living in cloud cuckoo land.
You have to
Which is
pay for it. Yeah, you have to pay for it. And then again, the politicians come in and say, our fully costed plans. Well, they're not fully costed because you haven't got the actual figures, because that's the excuse you're going to use when you come in. So we are going through an election period where it's election by soundbite, or it's policy by soundbite.
Always are, yeah.
And those soundbites tend to be carefully chosen just to hit your message, so they're disinformation. So this is... an election by disinformation
Yeah,
coming
all
out.
it
So
is.
it's lies.
Yeah, yeah.
Disinformation is a lie.
But then if we refuse to vote for parties that are honest about this is how much it's going to cost you, if you want this, again, people said they want, a German, French or, Norwegian healthcare service. I hate to tell you the rates of tax those guys pay, but it's a heck of a lot more than we pay, guys.
Oh, yes.